I was the night cleaner on the top floor when another nanny came flying out. Blouse-stained eyes wild, and before the elevator doors even closed, I could hear the baby in there screaming, like the building itself was cracking. So I set down my mop, took one breath, and in the next 5 minutes, a billionaire's son reached for me, and my life turned a corner I never saw coming. The company was Lark Dynamics in Seattle, all glass and quiet, and the kind of carpet that eats sound. The man was Graham Lark, with a face from magazines, but eyes like he hadn't slept in months. The kid was Milo, red and trembling, fists balled up like he was fighting air, and when I knocked and said I was just the cleaner, he told me to stay back because the boy spit and scratched and trusted no one. Yet Milo looked at me locked on and lifted his arms like a little king, demanding to be held. And what do you do in a moment like that? You know what I mean? You forget your job title and step forward. He went heavy against my shoulder, hiccuped once and fell asleep while the rain stitched the windows, and Graham just stood there like the floor might swallow him, whispering that for months, not one person, not him, not the therapists, not the parade of nannies, could do what just happened in seconds. And I said, maybe he just needed to be held, which sounded too simple for a room that expensive. But there we were. The next morning, my agency called with a special assignment at double pay, and by 9 a.m., I was at the Lark House above the lake, where silence had a price the housekeeper misses. Haglin gave me that "we'll see" look, the cook. Ray pretended not to stare, and I tried to keep my head down, except Milo kept looking up like I was supposed to be there. So when Graham asked me to be a live-in nanny, I said I'd never been one. And he said he didn't need a resume. He needed what I'd done, so I moved into a room that smelled like cedar and new paint, and told myself not to get attached. Yeah, that happened. The house taught me its little rules, the coffee machine that hissed like a dragon, the nursery window that only opened if you lifted, then slid the white noise playlist that worked, and the one that made Milo cry harder. And day by day, he started eating for me soft and messy. He laughed when I did goat sounds. He pushed peas at my mouth like he wanted to feed me back. And at night, I hummed a Spanish lullaby my Nana used to sing, while Graham stood in the doorway, holding the baby monitor like a prayer he was almost afraid to say out loud. And we didn't talk much about grief, because grief makes you bargain with silence. Then the fever hit like a train on a wet track, skin-burning eyes glassy, the storm outside shaking the deck lights, and I told Graham we'd ride it out together. He brought cool cloths and warm water, and anything I asked. And around 3 a.m., he said low into the dim that his wife Ava died on a Tuesday. Taking Milo to a simple checkup he told her he couldn't drive to, and now every time the boy cried, he heard tires on rain, and I said fear can sit in the room. It just doesn't get to drive. And he breathed like he'd been underwater too long. And by dawn, Milo reached for his father's hand and smiled, and Graham laughed for real. And something in that big, cold house softened like a fist unclenching. 2 weeks later, the front door opened, and Trouble in Heels walked in, Serena Vale, Ava's sister cheekbones. Like a verdict voice expensive enough to slice, and she looked at me the way some people look at a stain on a white shirt, and told Graham the board would not enjoy the headline of a cleaner turned nanny. And she said, my nephew, like it was a legal claim. And I said, my name is Lena, and I'm here for Milo. And she gave me a smile that wasn't a smile, and moved through the rooms like smoke. After that came the welfare check, the inspectors counting outlet covers and cabinet locks, while Serena perched on the sofa with perfect posture. And I told the younger inspector the sequence that settles Milo during night terrors, chest to chest, hum, before words sway like a slow boat. And she wrote it down with a face that said, keep doing what you're doing. But Serena didn't leave it alone. She invited me to a hotel cafe that looked like a jewelry box and offered $60,000 to disappear, and I won't lie. 60 grand sounded like new lungs, insulin for my Nana, without me choosing which bill to skip, maybe paint for our apartment hallway. But I told her she speaks transaction, and I speak kid, and grief, and stay, and she said, everyone says that before they take the envelope, then walked off with her untouched espresso. The next morning I woke up a headline long lens photos through hedges, me holding Milo on the back steps. Graham laughing with Ray over a grill, a shot, where Graham's hand barely brushed my shoulder as I reached for a cup, and the article called me a mysterious live-in and said power imbalance like it was a spell, and the board called the reporters camped at the gate, and a family court judge reopened custody paperwork, and the lawyer with hair that never moves told Graham if he wanted zero risk, he should end the entanglement immediately, like I was seaweed wrapped around a propeller. And Graham didn't look at me when he said he believed me, but couldn't risk losing his son. And I packed in a silence that felt like a bruise, Mrs. Haglin cried in the pantry, where she thought no one would see. Ray shoved a paper bag at me with sandwiches and apples, and a note that said, "Come back when the knives are dull again." And Milo watched my suitcase the way kids who've already met loss watch doors. And when I held him and whispered, "I had to go," he kissed my cheek. Stubborn and sticky and perfect. Then yelled "Mama" so hard my ribs shook, and I walked out anyway, because sometimes loving someone means carrying the sharp end of the thing. Back in my apartment, I found an old clip on the baby monitor. My own humming from a night I forgot to switch it off, and I let it play in the dark until the radiator clanked back, and a week later the city went quiet for a press conference, because Serena stood behind a podium in a black suit and said she needed to tell the truth about the night her sister died, and she confessed to a fight. Sharp words, a slammed door, rain and speed and guilt that had been looking for a place to sit. And she said she blamed Graham because she couldn't carry her part, and she admitted she attacked the only person who kept her nephew laughing, that she hurt me because it was easier than looking at herself. And I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired and seen, and that afternoon there was a knock, and Graham was on my threshold with rain in his hair and a bouquet like a teenager, and he didn't give a speech. He said, "I'm sorry, and will you come home not as staff as family?" And I told him our worlds are not the same. And he said, "You made the house a home, not the pool or the chef or the quarterly reports. You," and he knelt this man who could buy a building outright and opened a velvet box with a simple ring that looked like it had always been waiting for my finger. And he said, "I don't want you to be Milo's nanny. I want you to be my wife and his mother." And I didn't debate because my heart had been leaning his way for months, and gravity finally caught up. We married small beneath the cherry trees, no drones, no fashion spread, just vows, and Ray pretending his eyes were watering from the grill. And Serena stood in the back with her hair down, looking like someone who'd learned how to sit with consequences. And when she hugged me, it wasn't a cymbal crash of forgiveness. It was 2 slow breaths, and I will spend time paying what I owe. And a year later, a baby girl with hurricane hair and a laugh like rain on a tin roof showed up, and Milo named her Star because she slept best under the ceiling nightlight that threw pinpricks across the nursery walls. And on Saturdays, Graham burned pancakes and called the char his signature, and I walked the kids to preschool with a thermos that never stayed full long enough, while they waved like they were boarding a brave ship. And on the hard days, he wrote letters he kept in a box beside Ava's photo gratitude, instead of knives, because grief didn't leave. It just learned to share the blanket. If we were a movie, we'd end with the 4 of us on the Washington coast, where the ocean looks older than time. And we did that once, Milo shouting the sun was kissing the water, and Star clapping like the day put on a show for her. And I asked Graham if he still thought of Ava, and he said every day, but it's a thank you now. And I leaned into him and thought about the mop, the cry in the glass room, the sticky baby kiss that said, "You belong to me," The sister who went to war with the wrong enemy. The man who figured out the bravest thing he could do wasn't build another company, but ask a woman from over a laundromat to stay. Here's the part where you decide if we got it right or not, because it's messy and real and open to argument. Did Graham protect his child, or hide behind strategy? When he let me go for that week, would he have found his spine if Serena hadn't confessed on live TV? Was I wrong to accept a proposal with grief still living in the guest room, and the big one people whisper about? Can a power imbalance really disappear just because people are kind? Or do we have to name it every day and keep choosing each other on purpose, you tell me? If this hit you anywhere tender, drop a comment. Argue with me, tell me what you'd have done for 60 grand on a silver card, or what you've learned about who really belongs in a family. Blood money, or the ones who show up at 3 a.m. with a cool cloth and a bad song. And if you want more stories told straight from the scar, not the shiny parts, hit subscribe. And let's keep the conversation honest.